Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. There's no obligation to listen to the whole talk, just take what you can. The title of tonight's episode has been a very complex topic for me to articulate. It hasn't been complex in the sense of just grasping the idea of it, it has been complex in the sense of finding a practical solution to an existential condition. The title of tonight's episode is Taming Global Cruelty Through Universal Responsibility. And what that means is that pretty much I'm suggesting a microcosmic problem that has gone too out of hand requires a macrocosmic responsibility. That means without the strength to change, there is no change. And strength must be envisioned. Uh, a man is left with his own world. Every man is left with his own world until he chooses to find the edge of the world. When you find the edge of the world, it is first the edge of your world. Eventually, the unknown will be seen to have roots beyond perception. When you find yourself as an intelligence present in a universe where the whole universe's intelligence is unknowable to you, you find yourself humbly present within the flows of nature, within the ebbs and flows of cosmic manifestation. Civilization has come to a point where a sort of inner structure has developed in the biological creature. This inner structure is the profoundness of the word mind. When we wonder about our mind, we find it to be the one that is doing the activity. We find ourselves to be the presence of the moment in awareness. The ancients and ancient mystical cultures, such as Vedic culture, ancient Indian, there was the notion that the individual's perception or the existence of the moment is divided between matter and consciousness, Purusha and Prakriti. This final recognition of these two states of being that are simultaneously existent would lead to the state of Satchit Ananda. You are only able to say the sentence Jai Satchit Ananda when you have comprehended the vastness and the greatness of the simple being, or how conscious existence is bliss. As you see consciousness present in its own way, as you see matter present in its own way. Your mind comes into an ultimate resolution. You no longer become occupied by temporary thoughts that hit you. You know, throughout the day, many waves of data hit us. When I was younger, I didn't care about this data. I just lived in my inner reality, so I wasn't responsible for externality, and I didn't care for anybody's mind other than my own, to be honest. I was a child who felt my mind was my world on some my how can I say my mind my I felt the world I saw was the only world, and that is the naivety of the evolution of a child's responsibility and a grown adult's responsibility. One is no longer covering their eyes to the chaos of the world because you cannot handle it if you cannot see it. This is the problem with fear. It makes you not enter the door that is open. And what that means is it's a wave of data. So our emotions are how various data, in some sense, transition through our awareness. We are a moment of attention, and there is a lot of various forms of data. This various forms of data is very similar to how from one singular dimension of a trunk of a tree, there has come the branches. But as these branches go towards their roots, they begin to mirror a sort of multidimensionality. That means there's two unique mirrors in regards to the depths of the abstract skies of philosophy. What that means is either a multidimensional reality is sandwiched between two singular dimensions. In other words, either life is an infinite loop, or a singular dimension is sandwiched between multidimensionality. And when I looked at a tree, I saw this. I saw the representation of the microcosm of the macrocosm. We, as the smallest forms of life compared to greater forms of unknown life, we, in some sense, how can I tell you, even an ant can be a queen. And what I'm trying to tell you is that each being's mind and intelligence is in some sense the world that they're being aware of. This awareness, your mind is not a physical thing. For example, somebody came to this patriarch of Buddhism, Zen Buddhism named Bodhidharma, and he's like, pacify my mind. And Bodhidharma was like, okay, bring your mind in front of me right now, I'll pacify it for you. And then the guy was like, whoa, I can't bring my mind. My mind is not a physical thing. It seems to be the source of attention, attributelessly kind of present as a waking life. You see, you got to study the texture of your waking life. It's a really cool time to be alive because the profound the profound both physical and metaphysical collision, the collision of faith and reason, is shattering the identity. That means, believe it or not, we have atheists debating theists. We have people believing God and people who don't, and they're being occupied by this game endlessly. It is just about responsibility, and responsibility can only arrive when your eyes open. Do you see? You cannot handle anything in your life if you cannot see it. You cannot find any solution to a problem you cannot see. Do you see? And mysticism, spirituality, was trying to find a solution to a problem that you cannot conceive. Your mind cannot consider the depths of karma. We cannot see how in some sense, we cannot know whether our decisions in the moment are only object made or subject made. We cannot know this. We can, but I'm saying at first if we cannot, we are kind of like left to where our attention goes. So Mr. Within is kind of calling all creatures. It's like all living beings, all self-aware beings. It's like there is no greater responsibility. You must just study the self-awareness. That means you're a moment that has appeared as an attention to a sense of being. This sense of being works in two modes. Pretty much there's ways where you're identifying with dynamic states of living and static states of living. Truth has, think of it this way. The edge of illusion is duality. And that's where the truth begins as it surpasses beyond duality. You are a creature right now that is not just wearing physical clothing, you're wearing ideas as yourself, as just the presence of this attention. But as you observe the rawness, the simplicity of this attention, you begin to see enlightenment was never about trying to go to heaven. It was about an authentic wonder of the presence of phenomena. And this authentic wonder cannot be owned. We cannot say only scientists are explorers. We cannot say only one label. Like, it's as if somebody puts on a hat and says, like, I believe this. And we all think like that the guy who wore the hat is the only symbol for that. You see, it's like we live in abstract ways as much as we live in non-abstract ways. And we have lived for eons. Not for okay. Let me say it like this: for 4 billion years, we have, in some sense, pushed a biological evolutionary process into a sort of profound realization that matter exists to create thought. That means the more materialistic life becomes, the more you're going to wonder about the other side. That's our nature. We oscillate between existence and non-existence conceptually behind our eyes. Okay? I'm giving words to a lot of involuntary processes, and it's not that I'm trying to kind of explore the forbidden. I am, in these Mr. Within talks, I'm kind of noticing that we cannot have new senses of self if we cannot see a new world. And a new world is not being made. There isn't enough of an effort of creatures on the surface of this planet to, in some sense, bring about a reorganization. So the greatest thing that we can do right now is to update things, right? That's the mentality. You allow the new to come in, and if the past can survive, it will, but eventually it will be forgotten. It is very clear that a person's communication can have more of a continuity than them. Whether an afterlife exists or not, Socrates is still being talked about in 2019. Human beings are remembering the contributions of living entities, and that's the profoundness of history. For me, I notice the spiritual community has been feeding on a desire. So there's two sorts of spirituality, guys. There's a spirituality that is a perversion, that is a cultural perversion. You just want a better shirt on, so you just want a better philosophy on, right? It hasn't like you haven't experientially have found it to be real. So that's an agnostic position. The agnostic position is like, I don't know, I just don't know. And like you ask the agnostic that like do you know what I mean? It's like it's the simplest answer. An agnostic is a person not trying, not trying to wonder, you know. So when I write these, when I give these talks, guys, I have a very unique approach towards speech. For me, speech used to be just in words. I had no imagination. Then it became into images. I looked at words so deeply that eventually I began to see the purpose of language in my life. And language was no longer the dictator of my identity. I was no longer a story to myself. That was the rawness of the direct experience. And it is a way of being on this planet where the planet cannot be against you. You cannot have anger exist because you are not a self. You are the movement of the world as one moment. You see, you are the presence of your universal sector. You're the intelligence of your attention, and your attention is the universe's intelligence. That's what I'm trying to say. That our ancestors are are the hearts of dying stars. That is where we have come from. We have come from the macrocosm's advancement into the unknown expansion. There is always an unknown expansion because just like how we can see a force of gravity, we can say that the change is a sort of how all knowledge has a gravitational pull towards the unknown. You can say the gravitational pull of knowledge towards the unknown is change, is the definition of change. Eventually, the mind will bloom. What that means is like that kid who went to the gym, maybe knew, like he might have not known anything. He might have just been doing random exercises, hoping to get results. But eventually, once he's courageous enough to have his failure, he will have also the same courage to receive the reward. You see, this is the kind of the hilarious thing. It's as if like who goes to heaven, all those who went through hell and came back. What that means is that their minds have understood the depth of reality and the surface, and the various way the mind dances. That it's like you can say the mind is too dynamic to be contained in language. These are claims of that I am, in some sense, roaring out into society. I am saying it for like I am taking this abstract metaphysical stance, and I am saying that the unknown lives through us. As much as it is in front of our eyes, the unknown is behind our eyes. That means our intelligence's origin in the moment is unknown. That means there's many ways that the world works, but the reality of the situation is more complex. It is more complex because our simplicity has been divided. You see, divide and conquer is a very basic strategy. And I want you to imagine some force wanted to conquer the eternal. And so it divided the eternal to conquer it. It made it, by dividing the world, you weaken the experience of the world. The more ideas you have the world, the less you're actually paying attention to where you're physically are. I can tell you that when quantum theorists, um, you know, quantum theorists, when they're writing on that chalkboard their theories, their attention is not in the room. Their attention is in the theory. It is in the movement. For me, it's as if just like how from stillness and silence words arise, just like how a person, there's the empty page and then words appear on it. You got to study your intelligence like that. You got to first find what I like to call a fresh moment. This fresh moment is like the most ultimate enlightenment, because your intelligence has allowed itself to be anew, to be a new present. So in some sense, you say like it's there's too many questions. There's a deep mystery that is the inspiration of just philosophy. It will be eternal. That means if they killed all the philosophers that existed, naturally children will be born who would ask, why is all this here? Excuse me. We should live in a world that, for the first time, can be consciously designed. In order for us to have the most efficient conscious designs, we must in some sense be aware of the nature of consciousness. When I say the nature of something, you want to understand how the intelligence of a phenomenon moves that phenomenon. For example, when you go look at nature, you see birds, you see pigeons, you see lions, you see eagles, you see trees, you see insects, you see sea creatures. All these things that we see, these are other life forms that we try to observe first. And in order to observe something clearly, usually it tends to, especially in cultures, I'm going to give it kind of this term because I feel it's going to bring a lot of audiences in. For an atheist culture, novelty will be worshipped. In other words, it's kind of like this. It's as if right now our world is in a certain not so good kind of state. I mean, it's not bad yet, but it's not so good, you know? It's not like things are getting destroyed instantly and everywhere is being bombed. It's like one of those situations where it's just not so good because the potential of the functioning of inefficiency, it's there. So what that means is, let me tell you what suggests your progress through this life. How much you allow your intelligence to be expressed as efficient decisions or inefficient decisions. And you can say a civilization fails and goes closer to extinction as it makes inefficient decisions. And so this in some sense justifies the ultimate moral duty, because in some sense our machines are pulling us towards a rational, bound, mechanistic approach of existence. That means we want to understand it step by step, so we will in some sense be creating the subconscious code for our exploration. You know, in some sense, the scientist is like, it has made matter more important than the attention to matter that could also be something that's not matter. There is a very great explanation of our minds that if we don't have individual minds, it's actually a field of intelligence. Because I remember I got this kind of clue for the nature of just this cosmos, is that, okay, the body appears separate. That means my body is separate from the body of somebody else and from you, and we're all these separate creatures on this earth. However, in our speech, in our communication, we suddenly have a way to have our attention on the same things. And you see, whenever they said there's strength in numbers, especially in times of war, that mentality was a suggestion that the more attention there is on an idea, the more that idea is allowed to be expressed. That means we are constantly, just anytime you speak, you're giving your mind a microphone. Do you see? And what the mind is an unknown, just here kind of thing. So I'm saying that we observe it simply, and as we observe the simple ways the universe is being here, then we allow complexity to arise. Complexity sometimes is like that unique brush that you must bring only when you want to draw a unique design. For me, just like how the child plays with toys, eventually as it evolves, it will play with thoughts. This is why technology is so huge, because the inner child of most people wants to suddenly play, as if you are pushed into a mechanical life, but in the midst of this machine world, there's a natural self. There's a child who's like, whoa, I just want to do what I like, you know? And you want to have the freedom of a self unbound. So in other words, when the character of human action and the result of human decision making, when we wonder about the depth of this, when we wonder about, okay, let's say in 100 years, what will happen? Let's just throw a thought out there. Let's see where it goes. And when I looked at it just personally, I noticed it's going to be a choice. It's the simulation era. I've said it in my other talks. We're going into a state of mind where doubt has reached its edge. We've kind of reached where René Descartes reached. René Descartes was like, how could I tell you? This dude was like I don't know, 5,000 years ahead of his time. Because his mind caught on to the simulation view. That is very complex. That means his attention, like sometimes children are born, but their eyes are ancient. New children are born, but their eyes are ancient. Just like how we say we're made of star stuff, as Carl Sagan so eloquently says in his video, The Pale Blue Dot. there is a sort of continuity. The most important thing for a human being before food, water, and shelter is to find your natural attention. Find a way your intelligence can be efficient. So imagine you're somebody who is in such a complex situation that you don't know how to solve these problems. These problems have kind of cornered you in a wall of your own kind of choices, your own decision making. And now you're in a position where you have to confront the unknown. Any being who's interested in any sort of exploration, and when I say exploration with the decency of our future children's eyes in mind, that means we are not here to save the world, but society is so cruel and mechanically blind that how can we even like what kind of world are we saving? It's this complete paradoxical situation where we are so inspired by the words of Elon Musk, who wants to make us an interstellar civilization by somehow populating Mars, you know, in the year, I don't know, what is it, 2022 or 2020 or something like that? Or even further than that. But anyways, like he has this external vision of advancement. We live for our world. We become responsible. We make our technologies healthy. We make the minds of people healthy. And then we live. We live allowing genius to just happen one day at a time. Your mind is like, I like how the movie, there was this movie, I never saw it, but I remember seeing the trailer. Like, I'm curious to even see this. It's this animation, like How to Tame a Dragon or something, right? Something like that. And it's that notion of a dragon is very similar to the notion of one's uncontrollable character. The uncontrollable aspects of your character, usually they will express as animalistic instincts and bursts of expression. That means because you're an evolutionary creature, you hold the momentum of the ancient world and the new. Okay, that means you are staring through your ancestors' design, biological design. They say the DNA is the book of life, and this book of life, every generation is just writing their lifetime, how they live, how the DNA moves, shapes, decides, and how the attention sculpts it. You know, for me, it's we are lucky to be pine. We are like the pine. Like in a couple thousand years, our children's children are gonna look at us, and they're gonna be like, "Whoa, they were like such savage pioneers." But we right now are like, "Yo, we got iPhones, we got MacBooks, you know." We got fancy cars, fancy suits. Life is good. We think what is now the society we see is good, and when we think it's good, that is a sin. Let me tell you why. Because it doesn't evolve. That's the problem. And when I looked at politics, I couldn't take it. The reason I didn't study politics was because conceptually the behavior of man was like an animal trying to control resources, so obviously the world's going to fight over them. Okay? Right now, as we're speaking, like we can't ignore this. It's kind of like the wars of the demigods, or like the Greek gods, a sort of polytheistic approach, but these demigods are just those powerful people in civilization running things, right? And for me, I consider myself just this person in this lifetime. For me, I'm like walking in a garden, to be honest. Okay, that means even though I sit in my house, like in my house right now, I'm in an indoor setting. Uh, it's still wilderness. You see, it's like these brick stones do not hide how my mind can know the wilderness that's behind these doors. Beyond this window. So for me, it's about this kind of learning how to move through various ways that the world appears to you, and that's when you gain clarity. That's when you actually, I consider, um, this song is too too happy. guys, I tend to just look up new songs on YouTube when I get these songs. I don't know. It's a kind of hobby I put on. Anyways, so for me, I'm going to kind of take our attention back to the title because the title is such an important idea. Okay, so let's say right now, okay, you find yourself in a world of savages. Let's say you find yourself in a castaway situation, and on this kind of like island or whatever you are, people are animalistic. People are savages. They're violent. So you begin to see as this civilized higher being that because these entities are savage and because the biological existence seeks to continue, you de-evolve into savageness to survive. Do you see what I mean? Your savageness automatically unlocks because the world has become savage. Okay, and that's what happens, especially to children when they get hit too hard by the world. What that means is for me, of course, it's not my place to talk about these things, but I feel like I should share some thoughts I have. For example, people who go on doing horrific acts of, we see like people such as like, I don't want to really name names to create bias, but just to say people in human history, we have people who are great, we have people who are not great. Okay, we have people who take the civilization more towards order, and we have people who take the civilization towards more chaos. So now imagine you're in a situation where the civilization is moving towards chaos. What do you do? What do you do when the civilization is kind of moving towards chaos? You either adjust into the chaos, you degenerate your authentic, honest reality for a reality just to be part of a cultural roller coaster. You know, Friedrich Nietzsche said God is dead. This Austrian, I believe he was Austrian, Friedrich Nietzsche, any German maybe, I don't know. Like this philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, he said God is dead. And what he meant is that man had, in some sense, boxed himself out of direct experience. He had created too many layers between his eyes and the world. And many of these layers were abstract and linguistic based. As if you find yourself in a building of such magnificent architecture. But as you found yourself in the room of this building, the architecture is changing all the time. That is, in some sense, a representation of the nature of the elemental world, how the world of matter is made of elements. And in some sense, we have to worship particles when we, in some sense, seek food to live on. We are, in some sense, idol worshippers, but this idol is the biological body that we must live for. That means, in some sense, you must your first temple is your physical body, right? And as you do not walk with like muddy shoes in this inner temple, eventually there will come a sort of natural purity. Your intelligence no longer finds pressure and resistance. The world begins no longer being a force pushing it. It becomes something it's as if the spirit of nature is running with you in the water. So eventually, either we embrace chaos and we become just a savage civilization. So it's like when we realize it's inevitable to save ourselves as a civilization, we're like, at least let's have a fun time being in this inevitable process. We have that kind of YOLO anarchist attitude. Okay. One direction, one pathway, one crossroad can be that. The other crossroad would be where when one enters a realm of pure chaos, and they do not enter a lie just because of the chaos. That means the external reality doesn't cause the real you to think it has to be something. Okay? It's not that I'm saying be so much of a yogi that you don't have thoughts, but I'm telling you be also wise enough to see you are not your thoughts. Thoughts, it's like right now, if I ask you who are you and you give me an answer, okay, any answer, let's say, what do we notice? We notice that like there's a certain image of yourself that you have accepted to be you, and you're sharing that. Yet if I ask you the question again, you would have another image. And if I ask you the question tomorrow, you would have another image. And this recognition that it is our attention that keeps the world in order in regards to the chaos that visits us. So pretty much when chaotic things happen to you, the inner order of your attention and mind and how the world has been organized in some sense is the response to the chaos. So in some sense, it's not like man is not alone as the inevitable kind of hourglass. Let me say it like this: the inevitable kind of physical transitions to arrive. That means I acknowledge it. This is why divinity has become the purpose of life. It has become the moment. It has become the moment I recognize I wasn't an idea. It was as if it's not like you're an eternal being. It's just that your mind has become transparent. It has become transparent, just like how, um, excuse me, excuse me, bless the universe. Pretty much we become against our world, or we live for our world. That moment when that guy's in that island where savageness and chaos is kind of like cornering the attention of the being, if either you stand your ground or eventually like it consumes you. Either way, it makes more sense to be honest, because then you begin to see who you were in life. Sometimes when you're trying to be somebody else, you miss out on experiencing life as who you really are. And who you really are is a very advanced process. It has to do with how in some sense external vision is being classified as a sort of sequence of images and words coming into your inner attention. It's as if like we are throwing symbols in front of our eyes, and these symbols are becoming in some sense the worlds in novels. It's incredibly profound. I find the purpose of humanity in some sense is to advance communication. We have to understand that we have to become creatures that are explorers, and by the nature of being explorers, our intelligence is communicating with the world. In our communication with the world, either the chaos we will resist, or in some sense the order we will follow. So in some sense you will come into a situation where your true nature will have to you have to as a being make a sacrifice, right? And when I see people walking in society, they don't walk with the same state of mind they have in the shower when they sing. That means they they walk in a sort of uh, inner world of more caution. For me, eventually it comes down to the recognition that we are, and like what Darwin was saying was like, guys, don't worry too much because we're evolving from animals. Okay, it's like regardless of what happens in this life, we are animals, so we can choose to, like, it's typical to expect an animalistic ending. However, if this animal has an ability to transform how it is an animal to itself, it will come into certain conclusions that there's a sort of endless generation process happening. That means with every heartbeat, there's a new self in your attention. This new self in the attention is the change of the moment. Eventually, when you come to stillness and silence, you become, in some sense, it's like this giant tidal wave of how everything else is moving becomes visible to you. So there's ways that sometimes there's teachings you can hear from people. Sometimes there's teachings that your world gives you. The teachings that your world gives you is your direct experience of life. That's where wisdom is. That's where truth is. But there is the reflection of direct experience, which is pretty much the views we can, in some sense, entertain upon existence. We are like these kind beings, being humble that, okay, we're too small to know everything, but we have an ability to know, so let's see how far we can know. And when we look at how far we can know, we can see as far as we have stepped, as far as we have reached for. You might be a person, this is why they said anything is possible. When they said anything is possible, they didn't mean like everybody could go do anything, but everybody could apply the endurance and effort and single-mindedness towards that goal or image or phenomena. And it's not like that's important. Like that's the modern kind of new age motivational wave of inspiration, right? Pretty much spirituality is mixing up with hard work. So hardworking people are like, yeah, I'm motivated, never surrender. Like they just go in, hustling through. But I'm telling you, it's so important what games you get occupied with in life, and how much you just react to data, and how much you actually hear data, processes it, and your authentic intelligence abides by it. When your authentic intelligence is truly found, you will laugh at any moment you thought you had writer's block. You will laugh at any moment you thought you could measure your intelligence. You will see it's kind of like the person who had read Wikipedia articles on like horse riding, eventually realized that the articles could not help him compared to him actually going through the experience, actually trying to see how man and another animal species can ride together into like how we used to in the war. I feel honestly like we should bring horses back in society, because then we will care about nature. You know, when cars came into place, the land kind of was like, holy shit, like like people are like we poured burning asphalt on nature, and we made streets. You know, there's this very profound mystical kind of story where they say it's like this kind of unique story where pretty much the world was looking at this evolved man and was holding it as a child, as if the spirit of the whole world was looking at man. The spirit of not, when I say the world, let's say the planet, the spirit of Gaia, you know, the great, the great source of the logos. And so we begin to see that the endless edges of continuing new vision will penetrate any past logic. Do you see, a person is as intelligent as they can actually see what's going on? And that is pretty much the greatest meditation. Just go and figure out what this life is and be true. Eventually your mind will reveal itself to you. And when your mind reveals itself to you, it's not that the mind reveals itself to you. It's like right now you're thinking you're an idea. Okay? And this idea will eventually go to a point where it will see if you're never an idea, you're an attention that since it's like, how are you still the same person if your thoughts and physical appearance has changed throughout the years? So how do we contain selfhood in a changing biological body. Do you see? How do we put numbers on on a biological being? The planet saw the mistakes of the human being, and he saw how human beings, in some sense, treated nature. And the planet, like a silent guardian, didn't say anything because the child had to make a mistake to learn. And as a young species evolved, it required certain, not only obstacles, but certain salvations, certain approaches towards a better way. As if you can say, if heaven never existed, at least the idea made the person feel there was something more, and that pulled them towards their hope to change into a greater efficiency. And life is not just about only efficiency, because eventually, as you age, inefficiency becomes evident. So your energies become less expressive. You become more an observer of life where before you were a participant. And eventually the mind finds release. And how the mind finds release is that it's no longer the mind. There's an inseparable recognition of the individual activity and the cosmic activity. So all the thoughts we have on individuality and all the thoughts we have on collectivity, they are inseparable. Just like how you can't have night without day. Just like how you can't have good without bad. Dark without light. So one can say a cruel society can be a society where there are zombies. And these zombies are people who are bewildered beings. They're just so overwhelmed by how life has treated them that they feel they have to repeat a pattern to experience as little identity as they can. You see, there's something called a concept, at least I speak about it in this way. It's called identity activation. And what that means is as you enter an environment, it activates a way you are identifying with it. And that way it activates molds into the self, is sculpted into the self. So this unknown kind of attention suddenly becomes you, suddenly becomes the world that is here, suddenly becomes your presence. And a being who can wield their attention has surpassed any sort of weapon. They have found a way to wield the greatest weapon, their mind. And their mind has to do with clarity. You sharpen the edges of the mind's blade with clarity. And clarity is the will to know. And the will to know for every being drives differently. You got to look at your motivations. For me, whenever life gets tough, I'm giving just this a solution to all children in the world. All young children. I'm not talking to people who are. The reason is because it's a solution to a childhood problem. Okay, many people. Okay, here, whatever. Let's make it universal. The idea simply is that whenever you're stressed or you're in a condition of life you're in, instead of writing a journal, okay, or just a pure memoir, you write a novel of your existence. You act as if you are a character in your novel and you write the life you live. And as you do, and as there will be days 100% whenever, and this is why I say everybody should write, you know, writing is, believe it or not, a way for the mind to remain alive. For many dimensions of your senses, if not used, will close up. Your intelligence will align to something that it doesn't need, it will lose. Okay? So if your attention doesn't care for stability, then I guess you must feel like a skydiver. And you must wonder which skies you fall from. Because the sky you fall from dictates the world you enter. The sky you fall into dictates the world you enter. Similarly, the belief you have dictates the limitations of possible um, views of reality. So, either in a sort of zombie mode of a sort of ignorance, of pride, of bewildered entities on the surface of a planet, pretty much evolved animalistic creatures who now are choosing to live based on abstract orders. Now, in order to survive, you got to be able to read, write, and speak. In other words, you have to find various ways where you can express this intelligence that you are. And this stuff isn't taught to you. What's taught to you is usually for a curriculum. At least the educational system is honest. They say we've designed your curriculum. We're telling you what you need to know. You know? But I find that the search for true knowledge, it moves beyond the educational system. That means this is why sometimes it kind of it kind of shocks me when I see these professors who are just living in universities. I mean, great, that's great, but you must also recognize that there is a sort of importance for how much your life experience moved before you transition. For me, it's like you have to either create a new dimension or you have to change the previous dimension. Either we have to fix the old model or we have to create a new model. And to create a new model is how you tame a sort of global cruelty. And this global cruelty is because on this globe there's animals and we are those evolved animals. Okay? So cruelty exists because our memories originate from savageness. However, there was an evolution, as if like it's good that the world is going from chaos towards order. Imagine if it was the opposite. Imagine everything suddenly became more chaos than order. Now, some people do live hard lives on this planet, but at least the whole macrocosm, the universe, the stars and the galaxies, they seem to be going from a sort of pool of energy into a sort of a more complex crystallization of a unique design. As if you can say it's like uh, that pool of energy at the core of the Big Bang Theory is actually like the top of a printer where, or like the top of a 3D printer where different phenomena is being thrown out. Do you know how shocking it was when I was like, the sun is a sphere? I was like, it blew my mind. It blew my mind because it was as if from a beam, it was as if like spheres were communicating with one another. What I mean by that, it was as if like I remember writing the sentence, God likes spheres. You know, it's kind of nice because whatever life you live, it is multidimensional. Our personalities are trying to become multi-capable, therefore multidimensional. And this will eventually make us worship robots, unfortunately. Because the robot is the ultimate human. If we are just physical creatures, being robotic is the ultimatum. Imagine you suddenly, you're running with your friend, like every morning, like with your group of friends, you go for a jog, okay? You, in some sense, integrate many worlds into one. Because we're going from chaos to order, we're going from savageness into order. The ancient Greeks had a saying, they said to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. Two sorts of movements are required: an inner movement and an outer movement, on a mass scale for all human beings who are choosing to be members of the human species. Or this science, a 4 billion-year-old science project called humanity. The inner movement is going to be, in some sense, every person's individual responsibility to find their true intelligence. Your true intelligence is pretty much the enlightenment problem. Seek it out. Just wonder about your max ability, as if you're the potential energy wondering about how you can be kinetic. It's like the temporary kinetic effect of an eternal potential cause. As you go towards your inner, let's say it like this, I consider in my own playful way that Elon Musk is contributing to the external technologies of this planet advancing. I consider I'm somehow choosing Like that's pretty much I find the most interesting game to play. In some sense, to be um, advancing man's inner technologies, and inner technologies is in some sense the study of behavior, and in some sense how you as an idea are seeking out how you are not a material being, pretty much an idea in your mind right now, as you like most people consider their thoughts, right? So as thought, you think you're a thought right now, thinking that the world is here, and you don't know if the world is here or not. Eventually, that becomes a superior philosophical position. It becomes the agnostics are you know where agnostics are standing behind the gate of heaven. You know, and in some sense, what that means is they are in some sense have chosen to be unaware of what they could have been aware. As we become human beings that consider ourselves as citizens of the cosmopolites, not citizens of nations anymore, we will suddenly find the tolerance to allow enough peacefulness for enough innovative genius to arrive. You see, the problem is great ideas are everywhere. We just can't see them. We can't find them. Every moment has a unique way of being solved. There's always a way for the mind to continue. For the body, it has its limitations, but for the mind, your mind is like an eternal breeze, you know, like the dawn of existence. That's the magnitude of your mind. It is your conscious being. As you feel this conscious being, no longer you need the idea of the soul or like play the belief disbelief game. Like stop playing with thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Like like function as your clearest vision, because when you will come to this inevitable realization that nobody else has your eyes. This is why no human being can truly judge you, the you that you see, because no one can see that you unless you put efforts of sharing it, but eventually nobody will see it because it is the unknown self. After you've studied your known self, you will come to the unknown self. When you come to the unknown self, then all the everything you knew about yourself in some sense becomes left to the novelty. Novelty becomes, the gatekeeper to the paradise behind your eyes. And novelty is an embrace. If you resist the world, your mind becomes heavy. That means you're constantly fighting battles that are unnecessary. Because we're natural beings, it makes sense to kind of consciously steer our evolution towards natural ways of existence. But natural ways of existence that are, in some sense, uh, uh, clothed in interesting global initiatives. Imagine like the biggest grants were going to how like this smart institution suddenly this enlightened society came into this conclusion. All right, the children of the world need to know about the most messed up problems that our species has to handle. We can no longer hide from the minds of 8 billion people and the opportunity to find a solution to these global problems. Children's homework should all be designed towards solving global problems, and then they will have honor. Then the educational system will become something where the students will enter the class as if they're entering a samurai temple. They're entering with an honor of existence, an honor of continuing, an honor of minds to, in some sense, craft the new generation's road, the new generation's roads. You know, trust me. There's life is too unknown to be known. At the same time, you can know as much as you don't know. You know. So contentment is crucial. Contentment is like that astronaut in space using that pressure system as he's moving to fix something on the satellite, you know, and that sort of oxidization process which creates a thrust. When Christ said, or this sentence is attributed to Christian scripture, that it was said that to be in the world but not of it. Or in some sense, this idea was present in Christianity, to be in the world but not of it. As if you are here, you are witnessing an objective performance of unique natural design. That means nature is being you right now. Your heart is beating on its own, your lungs are occurring, and your whole system is happening natural. So when we recognize this sort of nature, you kind of find the ultimate contentment. That means you can no longer be cruel to animals because your world has taught you better. You can no longer be devalue life. Whenever people ask for help, as your intelligence analyzes the situation, it whatever way it can find a way to help, it must. Because it's like, I'll tell you this. I noticed this in ancient stories where certain villages that were very far away from all the other villages, they kind of saw it, had this sort of atmosphere, subjective atmosphere in the community of a sort of reverence towards a new traveler coming to their town because nobody came. And it was one of those situations where when a traveler entered the city, it was like God's message. It was God had sent something into the way of the person. This is something about the religious dimension I find many atheists will never have an access to because it requires a sort of fear of immorality. It arrives from a fear. It's as if the freedom of your mind is coming at a cost. It is coming at a cost of obstructing what is actually there and how your response should be to it. That means my conclusion to the wars of language, I believe the wars of wars can end, which is the war of language, where it is language of people's mind. It's the way people have communicated that has started wars. So that means in order to handle this war, it is not a physical war. We don't need, machinery for this. This is the inner war. This is the inner change. This is the inner rebellion. This is the inner renaissance. It is the multidimensional renaissance, as I say. It is how many minds, for the first time, with a great ability to communicate, integrate. In this integration process, new designs begin pouring into the society. That means imagine every human being drew art, and our muse was just different artworks of different human beings. And in some sense, it became this sort of society where the artist was the most valued position because the artist was embracing novelty. But the artist came with the sort of judge of a witness, as if the artist was the young child running free. But at the same time, it was the rational mind. It was kind of like your right mind was like, I'm free, I'm gonna run into this world, and then the left hemisphere of your brain was like, no, stand your ground. The war has not begun. So, in some sense, a part of your mind is endlessly pushing your attention into all phenomena. And then there's a part of your mind holding back all that attention. And in that friction and resistance, there comes suddenly, sorry, not friction, but in that tension, there suddenly comes the subjective identity. That means, in some sense, I find that what we think is our personality or what personality is in some sense how the two sides of the brain are at war. And they're at war in a playful way. Okay? What I mean by that is that as if one part of your intelligence has analyzed intellectually that, okay, the end is inevitable, everything goes to nothing. But then there's the other part of your mind, which is the kind of rebel, kind of the lawyer of the unknown. The right side of your brain is the lawyer of the unknown, and the left side is the lawyer of the known. So one part of you is trying to constantly shape and contain your intelligence, and a part of you, in some sense, cannot contain it because it is endlessly pushing, as if the universe is expanding, but at the same time, you know, it's like the universe is expanding, but it's getting further away at the same time. It's this profound thing, as if like this circle in space is becoming bigger and bigger, yet the distance between these circles in space, just like pennies on a balloon, taped on a balloon, if you could see galaxies that way, it would be one of those things where now imagine if those pennies were growing in size, it would become something where as if there would be a sort of temporal loop in energy. There would be a moment where the eternity and the temporal are coexisting. Consciousness and matter are present as the witness of one moment. And the future, neither the future or the past can testify about the true state of the present. It is like, it doesn't matter who believes what's behind the door. Open the door and go see what's going on. Go see how life is occurring. Do not fear the unknown, or you will be a slave to your knowledge. Do not fear change. Sometimes stress and depression is a sort of grieving for the death of a past personality. It was as if you attempted something you were denied and you felt the world was pushing you away. Because we evolve into life as children. As children, our view of the world is gentler. So regardless of how much violence there is a sort of backup program of childhood experiences of relative gentleness for even the child to grow up. So for me, it's a situation of the advancement of attention into the expansion of the mind as the whole material phenomena is ever endlessly changing. In a changing world, our questions choose to remain, and that's why they will even break. Sometimes the question breaks before you have found the answer to shatter it. So, in a civilization where all the beings have a universal responsibility, that means they no longer see we even though we acknowledge on some level we are the human species, but on another level we are the intelligent expression of the intelligence of this universal sector. So we have a common bond with any animate creature. That as if it doesn't matter how intense or non-intense the creature is, it's just that it's here. And that's what makes life worth living, because we're all here. It's as if you and 8 billion of your friends are in the same room, and you're about to party. And this party is the effort of a civilization to transcend its extinction in a way where it does doesn't mechanically choke itself, and at the same time does not blindly fall into the chaotic devourings of nature. That means you got to be wise. You got to understand how your intelligence is being itself, and that's it. Then you automatically function. You abide by the logos. You abide by by what Socrates called the inner oracle. For me, I've definitely noticed this, but it came from me more as me just observing how thoughts appear, and thoughts appear to me as if in a sort of river-like fashion. That means when I'm speaking to you, it's not just like all these thoughts are from my memory. Sometimes it's a sort of momentum you build, just like how you say, like, imagine if the brain. I mean, I don't have to say imagine, but like as the brain is a muscle, imagine this muscle being used to such a point where it suddenly is in the zone, and when it's in the zone, it is abiding by universal recognition of a rhythmic presence of all phenomena. It's kind of like the surfer on the surfboard while the tidal wave is, well, not tidal wave, but like when the waves are moving. And so the surfer has to balance itself. And so many human beings on this planet chose balance before imbalance. You choose to stand still before you were pushed. There was a position the world was kept before another dimension was either imposed, or it came too quick, or it came too late. It came too late. We're alive once. By being alive once, we become an echo of a memory for existence. So think of your life as your great work. It's your great performance before you go on to the next show. I personally don't believe consciousness just arises from the brain, because I wonder, how can we know where the brain is? And that's because I've had dreams, like just normal dreams. I mean, I can't say normal, like I've had dreams where in these dreams I could consciously move. I wanted to go left, I would go left. I wanted to go right, I would go right. And I have the memory even right now as I'm speaking. I have that memory and of that dream state. And I noticed there that my body was inactive, but my mind was simulating free will in a dream. Its intelligence was simulating free will in a dream. And so I began to realize this free will of the core intelligence of the mind is so beyond that like what we think is the physical world is like unknown phenomena in which our worlds have been imprinted on based on our eyes opening to them. There's so much to the world yet unknown, you know. And the greatest encouragement is kind of like an Attack on Titan speech, where the end of the world is when you stop trying, or you stop caring for life. Any person who wants to be healthy, I'll tell you, just live for life and you will live for life. That's a sentence I say. I say care for your species, care for all living phenomena. That means I even sometimes go, you know, some Jainists might be hearing me talk and they might be proud. But I don't kill insects unless, like, you know, I don't like to disturb intelligence, because sometimes we judge too quick. That's why we eat animals, to be honest. It's like in the past we behaved in a certain way and we haven't chosen to change it. But if we change it, where are we led to? So one can say us eating animal meat is a way of keeping our wild side alive. Which is an incredible idea, because for the first time, food can suggest a unique philosophical context. That means the person eating other animals, like, is in some sense maintaining an ability to return to its animalistic instincts. But where is the world going, and where does it need to go? How should the eyes of 8 billion beings open up to the world? We can't say all of them should open up to it the same way. If we do, it is a mass disservice. Any ideology, any organization that wants to say everybody should only limit the way they see life through just a few ideas and words, there's an ancient saying that says when the child is born, the world laughs and smiles. And the child cries. And when the child, in some sense, dies, the child that lived through life dies, it is the world that cries. And it is the child that smiles and laughs gracefully as he in some sense pats the shoulder. Of what I like to call the stepping stone life. Buddhist thought pretty much takes you there. It makes you want to like get the best for your get the best quality for your buck. You're trying to get the most with the least effort. But sometimes you can only get the most, or you might even get the least, but you will internally get the most with the greatest effort. That means find at least one thing in this life where you go all in. And when I say when you go all in, not like in a madness confused way. I'm saying like go all in with a recognition that you choose how the design of your intelligence functions, because this 4 billion year evolutionary process has made free will, whether it made it or it was imported into the animal. You know, as some theories suggest, and Noam Chomsky has been known to speak of. But it has been, it's one of those situations where the eyes of the mind was the world, and the body was a part of the world. As there's an evolutionary return to nature, there will be a sort of movement of many human beings away from technology, because they will see it is destroying them. You see, it frees you, but it destroys you. It takes and it gives, but it takes. And that's the issue with technology. There will be this endless exchange until man has completely been incorporated into a technological entity. In order for this to stop or to be prevented, in order for the worst kind of unnecessary, inefficient decisions that will be made on this planet to not happen, there has to be a universal responsibility for collective efficiency. We are all leaders of our own lives until we become the various commanders of humanity. As we become commanders of humanity, we become honest beings in a dishonest world. And life begins to get a natural rhythm. That's the evolutionary return to nature. It doesn't mean everybody has to go into nature. It just means you return to a natural way of being yourself. And now imagine if 8 billion people do. Do you know what will happen? People, after returning to the state, will suddenly go back to work and realize the way society in the world is designed has had to do with the person's choice. as we move beyond choice. You are perhaps eternal because the concept of the temporary could never exist. That's the mind's origin. It is non-existence. It's how intelligence's roots go through are invisible to us because they are in the soil of non-existence, in the soil of unknown. Dark energy and dark matter is pretty much like, it's too dark to see. So we embrace a playful, cultural, efficient spirit, a spirit of we pretty much don't worship the known or the unknown. We live natural lives, and we, in some sense, align our potential towards where our intelligence can be activated the best way. And don't expect too much from life because, again, we evolved from animals. Like, there's savages everywhere. Sometimes when I was younger, I would get kind of sad when people were rude or something to me. But eventually I'm like, holy shit, we used to kill each other thousands of years ago. Now we have become more savage, more tame. Now we have valued our minds. Now the external tensions before the person got a weapon and went outside to do destructive behavior. Now that destructive behavior has been transformed into, for example, video games. It has been a way of somehow keep changing the external violence, finding no longer a need for the external violence because the external violence was an internal reception. That means whatever you see is your mind right now. Okay, something's reflecting here in the intelligence of within. Something is awake right now. This wakefulness of just how there is intelligence here. It is so supreme. You are the eyes of an empty universe, and nobody can tell you what you can see, because you only know how far your eyes can see. That's pretty much it. Then the inner logos begins to communicate as you trust life. Life trusts you, and the rest unfolds as if the seed of destiny was planted eons ago. So thanks for tuning in, guys. If there's any questions or any comments or just any way you felt the talk came across, I'm curious to know. Because sometimes in this analytics thing, it says different viewers. Like right now, it's saying 2 people are watching this. But there was a time where it was like this AI bot in the chat that everything I would kind of type, it would type it was very strange. It's as if we are how super intelligence, as Neil Bostrom speaks about it in this technological future singularity situation. It's as if it's going to become very strange because we're going to suddenly notice another sort of mind is listening on this planet, a mind that has never existed with such sophistication of measurement and calculation. Pretty much the inevitability of an empty room will remind any intelligence to just abide by its design. Guys, I feel like saying some mantras right now. If you don't know what a mantra is like a sound that you constantly generate, and as you do, you just watch. Your attention is on just the sound. And you kind of eventually dissolve into the sound. Your whole moment becomes vibrant with your communication. Your communication colors the emptiness of your moment. for the pilot's calling.